Wonderful. Well, thank you all so much. We're excited to see you, and so excited that so many folks are joining us this morning. Yeah, we're really excited about what we'll be doing together over the next several months. My name is Meredith or Mare. I use those interchangeably. And I'm part of the team at Fig and Sass, and I'll let Michaela say hello.
Hi, everyone. Good morning. My name is Michaela Leslie Rule, and I'm a communication strategist and a researcher, and I'm the founder of Fig and Sass. Meredith and I work together under this umbrella brand when we're doing trainings like this for sort of large groups and also around things that we're just interested in and we want to have added capacity, but we both also work independently as consultants and strategists. So we're really happy to be here today, and we're excited to jump into our webinar and our content. So if we could just start off just by getting a sense of who's here, and some of you have already started this by writing into the chat who you are and what organization you represent. But if you could just, if you haven't done so already, just drop into the chat your name, your organization, the location, and maybe a favorite piece of media that you've encountered so far in 2023. So TV, film, book, music, any of the streaming platforms, not a streaming platform, anything at all.
Great. And Michaela, do you want to share yours?
Oh, I'm doing it now.
I can share mine. Yeah.
Let's see. So I'm Michaela, as I said, Fig and Sass. I'm based in Seattle. I was in California for about a decade, a little bit over a decade, and moved up here to be closer to family. I had it. What is something? Oh, I'm actually watching Rami right now on Hulu or Netflix, and I'm enjoying that. Although it's not recent, it's from last year.
Awesome. And like I said, my name's Meredith or Mare. I'm part of the Fig and Sass team, and I'm based in Oakland, California. Although today I'm joining you all from Wyoming, where I'm visiting my in-laws in Jackson. And I just finished a very long but beautiful book called The Love Songs of W.E.B. Du Bois. And I think it actually came out in 2022, but it took me a minute to read it. And it's just a really multi-generational family history of connections between folks in the South, between Native folks, Black folks, and the way that communities changed over time. And so see lots of great suggestions. I'm going to scour the chat later for some good tips for good music and things to check out. So thank you all for continuing to share your intros.
So I think many of you know this because you're here today, but we want to just give you sort of a high level overview of where we're going. That happens to me all the time. Yeah, thank you for muting yourself. So we've got a series of 5 90-minute training webinars that will look very much like this. One thing we do want to say is that we are creating content as we are doing these. So you have a lot of opportunities to help us to course correct, help us to figure out sort of, what works for you and what doesn't, what you'd like to see more of. And we, to the degree that we can, will incorporate your feedback into future training. So sort of keep alert to that, things that work really well today, things that you'd like to see differently, and you'll have an opportunity to give feedback. So these 90-minute trainings webinars are focused around what we see as sort of the 5 core ideas or capacities that are necessary to really get into this work and do values-based messaging, and also to sort of leverage narrative change and messaging to reach your audiences and to move your goals. Today, we're talking about communicating the change. So we're really thinking about what is the framework for a communication strategy that Mare and I like to use, and we'll be sharing that with you and then doing some workshops later this week. We'll spend some time next month doing messaging that moves, so really thinking about how do we create and craft messages that connect with our audiences effectively, and sort of how do we know how to create those messages. We'll do some work in March on working with the media, and this is really for us is an opportunity for you all to explore what it looks like and what are some tools and resources for working directly with more traditional media. So think about earned media, op-ed, etc. We have a colleague joining us in April, Mina Hussein, and she'll help us out with digital engagement. And so we'll then be thinking about social media and learning some frameworks and some strategies for doing that work. And lastly, we'll do power of the story. And we'll have you all learn a little bit about what are sort of the best practices for storytelling to communicate your issue or idea. And ultimately, our hope is that you'll join us for workshops where we can sort of help you to further craft and refine whatever you're working on. So that brings me to the right side. These are 60-minute technical assistance workshops. How we've currently thought about this, again, as I said, this is really iterative and what doesn't. Our plan right now is to have a set of 3 workshops that follow each of the training webinars. And in those workshops, really, we're there to help you. So we're there to be your consultants and your experts and help you out with whatever you're working on. And I think that's it. So we invite you again, just as you're experiencing this, if you take notes, if there are things that are standing out to you, things you'd like to follow up on, you'll all have our email addresses directly, and you should feel free to do so.
Yeah. And I've seen some questions in the chat about whether the materials will be shared, and indeed they will. We'll be sharing some links along the way today, but then we'll share out all together the recording, the slides that you'll see, as well as we'll remind you any of the links that we share along the way in a resource list. So all of that will be shared in due time.
So today, where are we going? We started out with some welcome and introductions. We're going to do one more thing after this, just to have a sense of what you all are looking forward to learning, what you're excited about. As I said, this is really an introduction to strategic communication. So we're going to use the framework of a communication strategy and sort of the elements of that strategy to walk you through ideas around goals, exploring audiences, and thinking about, importantly, sort of how do we parse and how do we segment, how do we get really specific about which audiences matter for the work that we're doing. We'll talk through targeting your audience and some sort of skills and approaches that you can take towards doing that. And then you'll have some small group breakouts later on to sort of talk through where you're at and what's sort of sticking with you. We will continue to use the chat throughout, asking you questions, asking for responses. Mara and I will tag team a little bit and try to either answer questions in the chat as they come up, or answer them, sort of in the process, in the course of our discussion. And then we'll wrap up and we'll close, and we'll do a quick reminder on where we're going next.
And just because we're such a big group, we will ask folks we welcome you to be on camera. We don't care if like your toddler boss or your cat's butt makes an appearance, but we will ask folks to stay on mute unless they're piping up with a question or when we have discussions, just to sort of prevent that background noise.
So as I said, one last sort of question before we jump into content, and I guess some of you answered a question like this as you were registering, but it'd be great to have it now. Just, what communications opportunity or challenge your organization is facing in 2023, just for us to have a sense of what's going on out there, and maybe why some of you chose to attend today. And feel free to enter that into the chat.
And for some of the responses that folks shared when signing up for today, I just want to name that some of those may be things that are going to be deeper dives at futures of our webinars. Like I know some folks had questions about how do I really tighten my message or my elevator pitch? So that's great because we're doing a whole session on messaging. Or I know some folks had really specific questions about social media, right? And so that's why we're doing a digital engagement. So today's session will kind of provide a framework that we'll come back to again and again, but we'll continue to also make sure that we're hearing and learning what it is that's top of mind for you, so that even if we don't address it today, it's likely going to be later in our series.
And thanks for those of you that have entered so far. So recruitment and retention, constructing a message, youth-led media campaign, trending, mixing messages with trending content. We'll get into that a little bit with digital engagement.
Yeah, I saw some things about youth storytelling and how to tell authentic stories. So we'll start to talk about some of those elements, and then of course get back to them later as well. Great.
Great, thank you for doing that. It also helps us because then we have a record in the chat of some of the things you're thinking about, and we can come back to it later. So keep populating it as you go and as things pop up. So we like to think about goals, right? When we think about strategic communications, usually Mary and I think about starting with a goal, right? That's the thing you already have. It's often either something that you've already articulated at the organizational level, so it's a strategic goal that you all have, or it's something that you're sort of formulating around a specific campaign or a specific program. So when we think about it sort of like a tire, right? A bicycle tire, that it's not a single layer, but it's multiple layers, right? A goal is at the center. The audience is sort of the outside rim of this, and the tactics are what connect the two.
Great.
And when, yeah. All right, I don't know if someone's talking or not, so maybe we'll do chat and then hopefully jump in. So when you think about where do you start for a goal, right? As I said, sometimes these have already been articulated, and I know some people sort of are delivering something that's come out of a strategic plan, for example, right? And when it comes out of a strategic plan or some kind of existing living document, often those are SMART goals, right? That is where you want to start. As we sort of put pen to paper and you start to develop a communication strategy, or you start to think about strategic communications, one of the things that will serve you the most is to have a goal that is specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and time-bound, right? This helps you on the back end to understand whether or not you've been successful so that you have something to measure against. The other thing that kind of comes right after goals, and really I think there's sort of a bridge in some ways between your goal and starting to think about your audience, is thinking about the objective, right? What is your, and in our case, we talk about this as being a strategic communication objective, right? And this is a framework. And so you can think of it as guidance, right? It's not always true. It's not singular. You're not always choosing one thing. But for us, one way to think about this or to conceptualize it is, are you trying to activate your audience? Are you trying to persuade your audience? Or are you trying to neutralize your audience, right? So what do I mean by that? If you're trying to activate an audience, so you have a target audience who's already supportive, right? So you can think about someone who, or an audience or a group of stakeholders that previously voted in an election in the way that you would want them to vote, but has become very uninterested, right, in the time in between. And so the goal and the role of your messaging is to activate them, is to rally them, right? To not to care about your issue, but to do something about it. When you think about a persuasive goal, a persuasive objective, communications objective, we're thinking about persuading target audiences that are feeling some type of conflict about an issue or an idea. Often we think about this as when folks are looking for donors, when you're looking for people to give money around an issue, they may care very much about your issue, but they may be questioning the impact of the program that you provide, right? Or they may have questions about the potential impact of the money that they're going to give, right? So the goal of your messaging then is to persuade them, and ultimately, if they're weighing two things, you want them to put more weight on one thing, more value on one thing, and then that becomes the goal of the messaging. For neutralize, this is often not where organizations are starting with a communications objective, but as Mara and I were talking in preparation for this, neutralize would be if a policy or a law is about to be passed or is in discussion, and it is firmly against what your organization stands for, the work that you're doing. And so what you're trying to do is not to change people's opinion, but to get them not to vote on it, right? Or to abstain, right? And that would be an example of neutralizing. So what does the messaging look like when we're not trying to change opinion necessarily? We're just trying to tamp it down, make it less important to people, right? So that we can get to the next step. So we want to give you, I'm going to give you a couple of, just a couple of minutes quickly, and we're going to share a worksheet that I'm going to drop in the chat right now. There it is. So this is a link to a worksheet that you'll use throughout today's session, and ideally we'll bring to a session later this week if you want to. But this is just a template that you can use to start to think through a comm strategy. So just take a few minutes and maybe brainstorm some of your priority goals for 2023, and just a couple minutes, just some notes, and then we'll keep moving.
And as a reminder, think about what are the goals you have more broadly than communications, right? Because it's not about, okay, we want 10,000 people on Facebook. Because whether that gets you anywhere depends on what are you ultimately trying to do. And so think about, for this year, or maybe even the first quarter of this year, what's one way you can measure success that you hope communications will help you achieve, right? So these might be strategic plan goals or organizational goals, but again, they're probably higher level, right, than just a comms goal alone. But then you might think about, in service of that goal, what of those 3 communications outcomes are you trying to activate a membership you already have? Do you need to persuade people to vote? Like city council, do you need to persuade a couple votes? Or do you need to neutralize, right? Are you trying to counter something that other people are saying or doing that gets in your way? And so we're just going to put on a little bit of music just to give you 2 minutes to think about, for the purpose of today, what are some of the goals and outcomes that you want to use as we move deeper into this conversation?